Good morning. Welcome to Church in the Mall. I have to say happy Father's Day to my grandpa right here and my dad who's watching online while he watches my two little toddlers. Of course, my husband here, we're expecting our third son, and he's got two wonderful teenage boys, my stepsons. And so I just want to say happy Father's Day to all the fathers and father figures in the room. It is, yeah. So I know that being a father and having a father and a father figure looks different to everyone. Mariah was saying a beautiful prayer this morning before we started about just how that looks different to each person. Sometimes we can have hurt and pain from men in our lives, and sometimes we can have, beauty and glory that comes from that. So as we all know, as followers of Christ, we only have one true Heavenly Father, and I feel like we are just so blessed and so lucky to know that. So just as we sing these songs, just, God can be so many things in our lives, and I just hope that during worship this morning you really contemplate on Him as your Father, your nurturer, the one who loves you and raises you into strong men and women of God. So let's just contemplate on that this morning as we worship Him. The fountain I drink from, oh, He is my song. Let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life, oh, He is my song. Let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves, oh, He is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days, oh, He is my song. You are good, good, oh, 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 let the King of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from, oh, He is my song. Let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life, oh, He is my song. You are good, good, oh, you are good, good, oh, you are good, good, oh, you are good, so good, oh, you're never gonna let me down. 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 are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh. On the clouds, King and kingdoms will bow down. Every chain will break as broken hearts declare His praise. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Our God is a lion, the Lion of Judah. He's roaring in power and fighting our battles. Every knee will bow before Him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks our chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Every knee will bow before Him. Open up the gates, make way before the King of Kings. The God who comes to save has come to set the captives free. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Our God is a lion, the Lion of Judah. He's roaring in power. He's fighting our battles. And every knee will bow before Him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Every knee will bow before Him. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? 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 Who can stop the Lord? Our God is a lion, the Lion of Judah. He's roaring
Good morning. Welcome to Church in the Mall. Welcome home. I'm so glad that you're with us today. It is Father's Day, and I thought it would be appropriate for us to have a dad joke to open us up today. If you are a fan of dad jokes, great. If you don't like them, tough. I'm the one up here with the microphone. So my question for you is, what did the baby corn say to the mama corn? Where's popcorn? A little bit of fun today. So it is Father's Day, and there's something to be said for acknowledging the role that a lot of men play in our lives. And I stumbled across this from a writer and a speaker, Bob Goff, and he writes a lot, and he has a profound relationship with God. And he said this, I think a father's job, when it's done best, I think a father's job, when it's done best, is to get down on both knees. And I love that image of somebody getting down on the eye level of a child. Is to get down on both knees, lean over his children's lives. Lean over his children's lives and whisper, where do you want to go? Every day, God invites us on the same kind of adventure. It's not a trip where he sends us a rigid itinerary. He simply invites us. I love that image of God and that parental role that he has in our lives, and just the image of care and connection. And I hope that is your experience with God. And if it's not, I pray that God will change that for you to make you more aware of his loving, amazing presence. Now, there's some things going on here at Church in the Mall I just want to make you aware of. If you are a guest with us, I want to let you know that if you want to find out kind of what's going on here is to go to churchinthemall.com/welcome. It's kind of where most of our information is easily accessible for you. If you're with us in-house, there is actually a QR code on that welcome card in the bucket on your table, and you're welcome to scan that with your smartphone, and it'll pull that up very quickly for you and give you links to all the things I'm going to mention. But if you leave here today and say, hey, I want to check out what she was talking about, go to churchinthemall.com/welcome. That's probably one of the best ways to find out information about what's going on here. And if you are a guest with us, I hope that you go there, or if you're with us in-house, grab a connection card out of your bucket. Because for every connection card that's filled out, we do some good in our community because of you. It doesn't cost you a thing, but for every connection card, whether it's paper or digital that's completed, we will make a financial gift to a local organization doing good work in our community. And the fun thing is you get to pick and we pay. So if you're a guest with us, whether you're with us in-house today or you're online, be sure to fill that out. Again, if you're with us in-house, you can find it in your bucket on your table. Just fill out that connection card and make sure it gets in one of those Give Hope stations, which are those white mailboxes located around our space. Or if you're online with us today, churchinthemall.com/welcome, there's a digital form of that card. And on both of those, you can select a local organization, even fill one out if you would like, if you don't find one that suits you. And if you need a suggestion, I always point people to the Food Pantry Network in our community just because they do such great work providing for people in our community and ensuring that no one goes hungry. So thank you for being here. That's just one way that we acknowledge that we are appreciative of your presence and how you make this a better place just by being here. Last weekend, we had one of our church picnics. We tend to do this over the summer. We go to Geller Park, and if you're not sure where Geller Park is, because we're going to have 2 more of these things this summer. We're doing once a month at the park. Geller Park, shoot down 30th, make a left onto Cynthia from here, and you're going to hit Geller Park just by going to the very end of Cynthia Street. We're going to have another one of those picnics on July 10th, so we won't have worship here. We'll be at the park on that Sunday, and I hope that you will join us. We had a great time last Sunday. Just a lot of, a time of worship, but also just connection and a great meal together. So I hope that you will join us on the second Sunday in July, on July 10th for our next Church in the Park picnic. Some other things to let you know that are going on today. We will be celebrating communion together today, so if you're with us online, I encourage you to gather those elements together. Coffee and toast work, so do juice and a cracker. For those of you in-house, if you've been here before and recently, you know that we do a communion line, and you're welcome to do that. But we also provide individual communion cups if that's your preference. So you can kind of make that choice for yourself. We will do communion later in service, but if you want to take advantage of those individual cups, there's a small bowl of them over by that picture with a bridge on that counter there. So grab that at your convenience during service, and we'll celebrate communion together a little bit later in service. And for those of you who call Church in the Mall your church home, thank you for your continued support. Your generosity makes possible the everyday things that happen here, and I am grateful for that. If you are with us today in-house, you're welcome to make your gift in one of our Give Hope stations, or if you would prefer to go online and make an online gift, you can go to churchinthemall.com/give, and there'll be information as well as a means to make a gift online today. So I'm just appreciative of your everyday support of us. And I want to take a moment here and read our scripture for us. It comes to us from Acts 18. And if you've never read the book of Acts, it is basically the early kind of journal of the church. It has some history in it, has some theology for us, but mostly it tells us what happened after Jesus ascended, after Jesus rose from the dead and then went back to the Father. That we have this history of the early church recorded in Acts. And our passage today comes to us from Acts 18. And I'm going to be starting with verse 24. And today we're in this series called On-Ramps. And we're talking today in particular about three individuals, Priscilla and Aquila, who were early Christians and who had a deep connection with the Apostle Paul, but also had a friendship with a man named Apollos, who would become a critical figure in the early church. And so let me read this passage for you that comes from 18, verses 24 to 28. Meanwhile, a Jew named Apollos, a native of Alexandria, came to Ephesus. He was a learned man with thorough knowledge of the Scriptures. He had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and he spoke with great fervor and taught about Jesus accurately, though he only knew the baptism of John. He began to speak boldly in the synagogue. When Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they invited him to their home and explained to him the way of God more adequately. When Apollos wanted to go to Achaia, the brothers and sisters encouraged him and wrote to the disciples there to welcome him. When he arrived, he was a great help to those who by grace had believed. For he vigorously refuted his Jewish opponents in public debate, proving with the Scriptures that Jesus was the Messiah. Take a moment and pray with me before we continue our worship and song. Gracious Lord, I would ask that you would open your word to us today, that your Spirit would be powerfully felt today. Lord, you are already in our midst. Make us more aware of you and what you have to say to us today. Lord, move in us, not simply so that we feel good about what we hear, but Lord, that we are changed by it, that your Spirit is powerfully felt in our midst, and that in that we are changed, that we are blessed to be a blessing. I ask all of this in the powerful, beautiful name of Jesus. Amen. You join us as we continue our worship today.
How do you know when a joke is a dad joke? It becomes apparent. Hey, parent. I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard tender searching for answers far and wide, but I know we're all searching for answers only you provide, 'cause you know just what we need before we say a word. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. Love so undeniable, I can hardly speak. Peace so unexplainable, I can hardly think as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still into love, love. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're a good, good Father.
So last week, I had to give driving directions. Have you had to do this recently? Like, I haven't had to do this for years. Mostly because when I'm trying to tell someone where to go, I just give them the address and they type it into the GPS or the app on their phone and they find me or they find where I'm sending them. But I had some friends who wanted to visit our home who do not Google and who do not use a smartphone. So I found myself on the phone with them giving kind of turn-by-turn directions, and it felt so awkward and so unnatural. Like I kept second-guessing myself, and I do this thing with my hands. My husband says he doesn't really trust what I say, but he watches my hands when I give directions because those are accurate. And I found myself going, okay, you want to turn right, even though I'm on the phone, they can't see my hands. So it just felt unnatural because I'm just so used to just doing it. And it's not because I don't know how to get to my house. I know how to do that. But it's so funny that I have become almost unattuned to it. And it's because I don't pay attention to it anymore. It's become so familiar that I don't even think about it. I don't even give it a second thought. And it's funny how we can become so unaware of something that is so everyday, so such a part of us. You know, you think about just even the roads we take or whatever, that do we really pay attention to them anymore? And for me to even think, how would I share this with somebody who is not familiar like I am with it? And we've been in this series lately on on-ramps. And if you think about kind of that journey that we take with Jesus, and I love the idea of an on-ramp. how it allows us to get on the highway, to go in a direction towards a destination. And it just came to mind for me as I was giving these driving directions, that we as Christians are moving in a direction towards Christ. That's kind of the goal of our faith. Yes, salvation is that point of entry. That's our first on-ramp to Jesus. But then we want to continually move in this direction towards Christ, meaning we become more and more like him. And in essence, we become more and more loving. We grow in our love for God and our love for others. And so this direction is always towards Jesus. And to think about, kind of a driving analogy even more, that, we're on this journey and so are others. And we have this unique opportunity to also invite others in that direction with us. But sometimes it's so easy to become familiar with places that we're going that we don't even think about how we're getting there. We don't even really pay attention or how we're going to get there. I mean, I want you to take a moment and think about a regular commute that you make. Is it to your house from work? Is it to your child's school? Is it to your parents' house or to the grocery store? Could you tell me the turns and the roads that you take? Or do more often when you're in the car, do you pay more attention to the music on the radio or the podcast you're listening to or the conversation that you're maybe having with someone in the car? Or maybe you're like me and you're replaying a conversation that you had. And you're not thinking about the drive itself because it is so familiar you can do it without thought. But sometimes when we are in that, it becomes harder for us then to describe it for someone else because it is so familiar. And we are out of practice of paying attention. And I think it's for other things just than driving. I think our faith can be the same way for us. It becomes so familiar that if you were asked to describe it for someone else, especially someone who was not familiar with it the way you are, it would be a challenge. That it would feel awkward, maybe unnatural, maybe even uncomfortable. And you probably think, I never want to do that again. I totally messed that up. I'm never giving directions anymore. I'm just going to give them a GPS coordinate and hope that they get there on their own. Or maybe we need to stop and start to take notice of how we got here so that we can better describe it for someone else. What on-ramps have you taken in your faith to get where you are? Maybe there have been people in your life who have been on-ramps for you, people who have invited you in, not only to know Jesus, but maybe know Jesus in a different way, in a deeper way, who have invited you maybe even into leadership or service, and in that you've been challenged and grown. I think it's so important for us to take time and pause and reflect on the roads that we have traveled to get where we are, for ourselves, but also for others. Because I think when we do that, we also invite others into the journey that we are on. And we also realize that it's more than just being along for the ride. We're not just a passenger, we're a participant. And when we're not intentional about our faith, about our direction, things get too familiar. Or maybe another word to think about is stagnant, or a rut, or lifeless, or just, it's what I do. Rather than having a faith that is fresh and alive, that gives you purpose and meaning every day, that sustains you when life is hard, that gives you hope when you are hopeless, that makes you come alive. It can happen to any of us that we become so overly familiar with the route that we're on that we just lose track of it all. and why I want us to dig into the three lives that we're looking at today. Three individuals who were very intentional about their faith and whose names may not be familiar to you at all, and yet have very important significance for all of us because they played a role in the early church that has become the church that we are sitting in today. And part of that was the relationships that they had in their faith community. Now, the names Priscilla and Aquila may not be familiar to you, but they were originally from Rome. They were tent makers, and they were Jewish in background. Most of the early church, they came from a Jewish background, that actually the apostles and disciples would share their faith in the synagogue, that they would share what they had learned about Christ and how he had changed their lives with others in the midst of the synagogue. And this is probably what happened to Priscilla and Aquila. And as tent makers, they would have, done this as their trade. They would have sewn tents. They probably worked with leather and fabric. But this was a great trade for them because it allowed them to interact with other people. In particular, they interacted with a man named Paul, who we know as the Apostle Paul. And Paul was also a tent maker, and kind of this is a more modern take on really what is a centuries-old profession of what a tent would have looked like in the ancient world. And this would have been not only for kind of travel purposes, but also everyday living to provide shade in the desert. So this was a vital kind of professional career choice for them. But as I mentioned, this was a connection for Priscilla, Aquila, and Paul because they were all tent makers together. And what happens to our dear friends Priscilla and Aquila is that they were actually originally from Rome, and they were expelled from Rome because the emperor kicked all the Jews out. And so they were forced to leave. And to think about this in terms of their journey, this is a modern map more so, but it has the ancient names on it. And so our starting point is Rome. And so they traveled all the way from Rome to Corinth in Greece. And so that was a significant journey for them. You think about uprooting your entire life because the emperor is upset with your people group, with your ethnicity, that you have to travel. You have to leave town and take everything with you. I think this would have been a significant hardship for them, and yet we don't hear about that hardship. We simply see that they become friends with Paul and that they invite Paul into their lives. No doubt this connection with their professional lives, but also with their faith. And this is a beautiful kind of image of what life can be like with people, that we find connections with people, not just in our daily lives, but also within our spiritual lives. Now, they would land in Corinth and they would work together with Paul, and then eventually they would make their way to modern day, what we know as Turkey, to a city named Ephesus. And Ephesus was a huge commercial and political place. It was actually very well known, not only because of kind of its situation for commerce and trade, but also because of its learning. And the image up here behind me, I'm doing a little bit of history for you guys today, but the building on this screen is actually the Celsius Library. It's kind of a well-known structure, and that is in Ephesus. And the image beside it is actually of a candlestick that they found on the steps. It's kind of somebody would have etched that in, symbolizing the Jewish community in Ephesus. This is why Priscilla, Aquila, and Paul all land in Ephesus, because they already have a community that knows them, or at least is familiar with them enough that they have something in common with them. And so there's this need for us to have connections with people, isn't it? Now, within Ephesus, no doubt, Paul spoke in the synagogue there, and Priscilla and Aquila would have visited. They would have gone there to not only kind of experience worship, but also learning and community together. And the image behind me is basically some ruins of what possibly would have been that synagogue. They're not positive of where the location was, but this is their best bet. Archaeology at its best is making some educated guesses, but it's kind of cool that we can see just the community and what was there at that time as we kind of explore our biblical roots. and also kind of see that connection with history and archaeology. But kind of getting back to Priscilla and Aquila, that Priscilla and Aquila would have gone to the synagogue probably regularly for community, connection, all those things, as well as worship. And it would be in the synagogue that they would meet a man named Apollos. They would actually hear him speak, and this was what you did in that culture. This was their version of YouTube, in a way, of like someone getting up and sharing their ideas and their thoughts, their experiences for others to kind of learn from or challenge and debate. And so Apollos is well-spoken. He's probably pretty charismatic. He's from Egypt originally, Alexandria, which was a very educated community. So this guy, he knows his stuff. He is probably later on a colleague of Paul's. Scholars actually believe that Apollos was probably a little bit more popular as a speaker than Paul. He was really knowledgeable, but also charismatic, so he could captivate an audience. And he was an early church leader for us. But this is before then. See, when Apollos meets Priscilla and Aquila, he is just kind of trying his hand at this. He's speaking in the synagogue at Ephesus, and they hear him. And they really, I think, are captivated by him, but they also notice some things. They notice maybe some things that are lacking in his theology. But they know that this man has potential. They've seen it. They've seen his gifts and his abilities on display in front of the whole community. And they invite him in. They invite him into their lives, into their homes, and they give him feedback. And I love how they do this because they take him aside. They don't do it in public. They don't call him out. They say, hey, buddy, you got it wrong. No, they say, come, have dinner with us. Come, stay with us. And probably in the course of conversation, they start to give feedback. Now, we're not certain what was lacking in Apollos' theology, because we read from Scripture that he was learned in the Scriptures, that he knew a lot, and that he was well-spoken. But whatever it is, Priscilla and Aquila took it upon themselves to kind of fill in that gap with him. And I love kind of this dynamic, because not only do they give the feedback, he receives it. This is a beautiful dynamic. You see, Priscilla and Aquila see this very eloquent, well-educated believer. And they realize we have something to offer him. Not because of ego, but for the sake of the gospel. And they invite him in. They invite him first into relationship. They don't scold him. They don't reprimand him. They don't humiliate him in front of everyone else and point out the errors or his, You ever have somebody do that? Like, you do your best work and then they point out your grammar errors? It sucks. It's actually just a way for sometimes I think people to feel smarter than you rather than truly help you. I've had amazing mentors in my life who have taken me aside and said, this is how you may want to do it in the future. They've taken the time to coach me so that I get better, not so they look better. And there's a difference. And I think this is what we see in Priscilla and Aquila here. And realizing that they have something to offer him. They don't treat him like a child. They don't treat him like their child. But funny enough, their outreach to him is very parental, at least in terms of good parenting and quality mentorship, because they want more for this man, and they want more for the gospel. And their actions demonstrate this. They demonstrate their care for Apollos and their care for the gospel. Again, this isn't about their egos. This isn't about them looking better or more important than this man. They simply invite him in. They befriend him. They are a friend to him. And I think that's an important distinction. There's a relationship here. He's not a project. He's their friend who they want to encourage and help in any way that they can to help him develop his gifts and encourage him to do greater things. They don't hold him back. They want more for him and are excited, I think, for him to grow. Because we read shortly after that Apollos would leave Ephesus, and he will go throughout the Mediterranean, and he will become a force in spreading the gospel. That he puts those beautiful speaking skills, his ability to debate, to good use. And part of that is because people like Priscilla and Aquila have poured into him. People who have shown him what it is to care for one another in the community. And Apollos will become a particular force in the church at Corinth. And I think we need to take some notes on this, to take some notes from these individuals. Because I hope you notice not only how this married couple care for Apollos, but also how Apollos responds. There's a humility. There's a teachability. And those are critical skills I don't think we always acknowledge. Those are character traits that we can continue to build into ourselves. See, Apollos is open to being taught. You think about this man. He was educated in one of the most amazing places, Alexandria. It was known for its library. Scholars still weep today over the loss that happened when a great fire took out the library at Alexandria. But this is where Apollos learned. So he has this couple, these tent makers. You just sit and sew all day, could have been his response to them. But instead, I think he's intelligent enough and humble enough and teachable enough that he sits and says, I have something to learn from everyone. And I think we could take a page from him. You see, I see this more often than not in our culture, is that we have kind of this stupid fear of being thought of as dumb. We have this huge fear that somebody is going to think that we're not smart enough or good enough. And so we hold back and we become defensive, or we pretend. See, we either act like, I know the answer, I don't have to tell you, or we make up an answer rather than just simply say, I don't know, tell me about that. Or we act like we don't care. And when we do that, we think that we're protecting ourselves, when in fact, we're robbing ourselves of the opportunity to grow. Because there's a beauty to be found in being curious, to realizing I don't have all the answers. There's also freedom in that. Have you ever been around someone who is truly curious? And I'm not talking about 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, because that's annoying. Because they eventually reach the end of your knowledge. But to be in the company of somebody who's truly curious, who just delights in learning, who asks questions and listens, that's an enjoyable person to be around. There's a freshness about them, about being willing to learn and realize that they don't have all the answers. There's a freedom in not having to know it all. To have to know it all is exhausting. But to simply be vulnerable with people at times and say, I don't know, teach me, tell me more. And I believe that this is what Apollos does in the context of this relationship with Priscilla and Aquila. And when we pay attention to this with Apollos, see what it gets him. See what it gets him. It gets him a circle of friends. Not only a circle of friends, but people who encourage him to take his next step. And this has significance not only for him, but also his faith and the gospel. See, in Apollos, being open to correction, to being curious about what he might not know, in doing so, God does incredible things through his openness. I love this openness on his part, and I love how Priscilla and Aquila celebrate him. And that's a beautiful relationship that exists within the church when we allow it to do so. And it can be a powerful on-ramp for us and others. Those places where we merge into a new opportunity for growth. See, Priscilla and Aquila created an opportunity for Apollos to grow in his knowledge and to also grow in his character, to be receptive to feedback. And he took it gracefully. And because of that, Apollos becomes a missionary throughout the ancient world. He is on par with Paul. He's probably actually a better preacher than Paul. He's probably more dynamic. Paul always talks about like he's not very dynamic, he's very simple. Apollos, I think, was just a sight to behold. But we know Paul better because he got his name in print than Apollos. And the thing is, Apollos could have rejected Priscilla and Aquila's offer. Could have said, I don't need your feedback. Could have gotten all defensive with them or argued with them. And Priscilla and Aquila could have fought back and been like, we know better than you because we know Paul. We hang out with him. He stays with us when he's in town. Or they could have called him out in front of everyone to show off how much more they know than this dynamic speaker. Or they could have been jealous of him when he left and went to Corinth and has this immense popularity there. He would go on to do greater things. His name would be known more so than theirs. They could have been jealous of that, but they are not. They have this incredible, generous spirit about them. And because of the generosity of Priscilla and Aquila and the openness of Apollos, the gospel and the kingdom of God flourished through them and because of them. And it all goes back to character. It goes back to character because character matters. And like character, our faith just doesn't happen. That both character and faith need to be cultivated. See, we need to pay attention to both. We need to pay attention to where we are going and how we invite others to go in that same direction with us. And I get this sense that, and I do this myself a lot of times, is that we discount what we're capable of doing because we think that we have to do big, gigantic, awe-inspiring things for God, that it better be worthy of going on the news or it's not worth doing, right? It doesn't matter if it's not big and splashy. You know, we have to be able to like move to Africa and open an orphanage or start a nonprofit that totally ends homelessness, right? And those things are beautiful and wonderful, and I think they need to be celebrated, and the people that do them are inspirations to us. These are admirable and good things, and they should inspire us, as well as the faithful individual who every day gets up, goes to their job, does honest, good work, cares for their family, lives a faith that can be replicated day after day, that they are a disciple because they make disciples. That is equally admirable and inspiring. But so often we focus on what is splashy and exciting, and we feel overwhelmed and that we could never achieve it because of all the other things we have going on. When in fact, all the other things we have going on are the exact places God has placed us to do the work that he has for us, the everyday work that is meaningful and sometimes feels very ordinary, and yet it is in the ordinary that God will move in extraordinary ways. Don't discount what you can do because it is small. Don't refuse to do what you can do because it is small. Because it is more than enough. because big things start small. Big things take time and effort and sometimes a lifetime to become reality. See, when we start small, we listen to feedback when we grow from it, rather than dismiss it or ignore it. We have humility with it. That when we welcome others in, sharing what we know, what we have learned, what we have experienced, and we do so in very real ways that are about the other person, not our ego. Our character, yes, grows in this. And I know that our character is always tested in the big events of life. I know that our faith is tested in the big events of life. But our faith and our character is always nurtured in the everyday, ordinary. What we cultivate every day, day after day, is what will bear fruit. So what are we doing to cultivate our faith every day? What are you doing to pour into your faith every day that invites you to love God and love others more? What are we doing to cultivate a rich, healthy faith that requires everyday attention? I think for us today, I have a few steps. They're very simple. And again, I think it's always important to start small. Yes, I know we want to have a big, huge, complicated plan that we can just give up on the second day. But if you start small and manageable, you can keep adding to it and find that it is accomplishable and doable every day. And then you can allow it to grow. So I want you to start small. I want to start small with awareness. See, this is what we need to make the familiar become transmittable, to become replicable, is awareness of what is going on. And in particular, I think we need to be aware of God. So my encouragement for us, my invitation to you is to start small. Start with awareness by spending 5 minutes. And I know 5 minutes doesn't seem much, but start with 5 minutes a day and spend it in quiet. Doesn't have to be absolute silence, because you could go sit outside and you can't shut nature off. But don't turn your phone on. Don't turn the music on. Just 5 minutes. Find time. 5 minutes. It's doable. Set a timer. If you blow past the timer, awesome. But it's doable, because at the end of the day, you can say, I still have 5 minutes. I can just sit and be. Because in that 5 minutes, you are allowing yourself to stop and to become aware of everything else. Sit for 5 minutes. Maybe you go on your porch. Maybe you sit in this your favorite spot in the house. Put the phone away. Maybe grab an enjoyable beverage. Have your favorite beverage in hand. Just sit and allow your soul to rest for 5 minutes and see what happens. That's it. See what 5 minutes every day can do for your soul. Because in allowing the world to pause, letting the world stop, and let God be God. One of my favorite verses comes to us from Psalm 46:10, and it's, "Be still and know that I am God." Be still and know that I am God. And this psalm is interesting because this sounds like a beautiful thing, and I've got a lovely image with it, is to, kind of sit and have your quiet time, when in fact, this is God speaking to an opposing army. You think about it in terms of warfare, and God is telling an army to be still and know that he is God. And I think we need that mindset for our lives that feel like we are in a battleground. To hear the voice of God calling everything else around us to be still and know that he is God. We need that in the very depths of our souls, and we need that in the very life that we live. So take that time. Mark it. Because I think that when we slow down and we are aware of God, we will find ourselves humbled by his presence, and we will start to notice those things that we have stopped noticing. We start to notice not only God, but also others who may need our attention, our care. And that's the second thing I want us to do. So the first thing I want us to do is to kind of set 5 minutes out of our day, every day. You can do 5 minutes. If you want to make it more later on, do it, but start with 5. I'm serious on this. Start with 5. Start small. And add to this a prayer. Start with this prayer. It's very simple. It's one line. God, show me who needs my attention today and give me the courage to give it. God, show me who needs my attention and give me the courage to give it. That's it. Our faith is most basically boiled down to loving God and loving others. And when we do it every day, by taking 5 minutes to stop and just be, and then asking God to show us those who we can love more, that is the roots of our faith. That is the power in simplicity and small movements that grow. A small amount of time and a simple prayer. I invite you to do this. I'm going to be doing this. To see how in these very simple things that our faith can grow every day. To grow in our love for God and our love for others. So that we too may have the openness of an Apollos and the generosity and the care of spirit of a Priscilla and Aquila. And to see what God will do with that, because he will do great things. Amen. One of the things that we do regularly is to take time for communion here at Church in the Mall. It has been a regular practice for us because it has such incredible meaning and importance. It is an invitation that God gives us to his table. And I know I harp on this, but it is his table. It is Christ's table. It's not mine. It's his. I am simply the voice today that extends that invitation to you. And as I mentioned earlier, for those of you online, gather your elements together so that you may celebrate with us. And for those of you who may prefer an individual cup, the bowl on the countertop there is available for you to grab one so that you can participate with us together at your preference. But there is a beauty in coming to the table with Christ, of sitting down with him in relationship. And that is what this table symbolizes for us. That there is a beauty in that of sitting down and being still and receiving from God the bread and the cup. That's an important distinction. That when you come up here, you receive the bread, you receive the cup, you don't take it. That we come to God with open hands. And I love that. And so today, as we sit with bread and cup, that as we take a loaf of bread and it is broken for us so that we may become whole. and that we receive the cup. And when Christ poured it out and shared it with the table, that he told them that this was for the forgiveness of sins, so that they would have a way to come home, so that we would have a way to come home to God. So I invite you today to come and receive the bread and the cup. When you come up here, I'll hand you a piece of bread, and my friend Scott will hand you a cup. They're individuals. They're yours to keep. If you don't want to keep the cup, there's a trash can right behind him. But today, receive the bread and the cup, knowing that this is from God for you. And great love, affection, and grace that he offers all of us. So I invite you to come and partake.
Holy, 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 our God is on the throne. So firm is his foundation, no power can overthrow. And he shall reign forever and ever. One name at last he
My friends, I hope that in your journey that you are attentive, that you see the beauty that God has right in front of us, that we're just not along for the ride, but that we realize that we have an opportunity to participate with God in this beautiful kingdom that he offers for all. The gospel is for all. That God loved the world so much that he sent his only son. That God loved the world so much. Why would we not invite others along the journey with us? And it always starts with loving God and loving others. So my friends, my prayer for us as we leave this place is that we would take moments to be quiet, to still ourselves and acknowledge the goodness, the beauty of God in our very midst, and that we then would be attentive to the needs of others, to be present to them as God has been present to us. I ask all of this in the holy, powerful name of Christ. Amen. I hope to see you guys next week. Have a wonderful day.
Trading punches with the heart of darkness, going to blows with your fear and calling. Never know until it's stripped away. The part of you has gotta die.